Thank you, guys. Okay, so the title is Improvisation and Spirituality. All right, what do they have in common? I was really surprised. I took my first improv class in 2012, and the advertisement said, Tantra on stage, see what it's like to be an actor for an evening. So I was single at the time, and I said, okay, I know what Tantra is, the energy work, etc. So let me see what it's like. I almost didn't go, but a friend of mine says, you got to get out there. I had been recently divorced. And so I said, fine, but I'm really nervous. I'm self-conscious. I want no part of this, right? So I went, and it was all about deep connection. It was about being authentic with your partner, and it was about being real. And in fact, that's what acting is, I've learned. Acting is not fake. Acting is being real in an imaginary circumstance. So in that session, we had wonderful exchanges, and by the end of the evening, we were doing improv scenes, which I was floored at. Improv is really about being truthful, right? It's got nothing to do with stand-up comedy. Stand-up comedy is you prepare jokes, you try to make people laugh, etc. In improv, you're standing on stage with someone, you've got to be honest, you've got to be truthful, all right? So it's very, very authentic. I've been compelled to be in this ever since, you know, since 2012. So that's sort of how I got started in it. Now, I just want to explain a couple of things about the framework of improv, all right, so that you understand, and then we're going to do some exercises, all right? But I promise you, nobody's going to have to come up and perform, okay? The exercises are going to be in small groups of 4 people, and there'll be lots of fun. And the exercises are really the muscles that we have to develop as improvisers, all right? Because as improvisers, you know, we can't improvise a scene because we don't know what we're going to say. So what we do is we learn the basics and the fundamentals, which are things like deep listening, which is self-assessment of what am I feeling so I know how to respond authentically, speaking the truth, giving to your partner, all of these aspects that are required to do a good improv. These are muscles that we build. And so the exercises that we do will be like that, and there'll be plenty of fun. All right, so don't worry about performing. That's not, I'm not going to ask you to get on stage and perform. Okay, so a little bit more about improv. There's a lot of different styles of improv. There's short form improv, long form improv, dramatic improv, comedic improv, lots of different styles of improv. The first one I learned was dramatic improv, and those scenes were really long. They were like 8-10 minute scenes with a person, and you got into deep emotions as you can. Sometimes it was laughter, sometimes it was drama, sometimes it was vulnerability. But we did a long scene, and Marina and I would keep saying this was our favorite type of improv because you really get into a true compelling scene. And the shows that we performed, they were like 1.5 hour shows. The scenes were like 8 to 10 minutes each, and it went everywhere. You know, as long as you're honest with yourself, connecting with your partner, it goes to drama, it goes to comedy, it goes everywhere. And it's really compelling. Now, that's the only kind of improv I knew. But then that place closed up, and I wanted to continue to do improv, so I signed up at a famous place in the city called The Pit. And there, all of the techniques I learned, they said were wrong. Because they're looking at comedic improv only, and it's about yes and. And I get it. I mean, what yes and means is that whatever someone says to you on stage, you have to say yes to. So if someone says, hey, Bill, dinner was great last night at Uncle Joe's. I can't say, what are you talking about? We didn't go to Uncle Joe's last night, because then the scene is over, right? And I'm discarding what my partner has offered me. Because when he says that, he's offered to me that, hey, we were together last night, we had dinner, and we both have an Uncle Joe, which means that we're related. He gave me 4 pieces of information. That's called an offer that I have to accept. So I have to say yes to that. And people say that's a vulnerability because I don't know what they're going to say, all right? He might call me his mother, his father, his son. We might be 2 animals. I have no idea what they're going to say, right? So when I get on stage with somebody, and if they're initiating the scene, I'm listening with every cell in my body because I have no idea what the thought is, what the idea is. So, so the yes part is is to accept the offer that they're making, all right? And that, in a sense, is a very vulnerable position because I don't know what he's going to make me. Right? I don't know what I'm going to be. So I say yes to that. And then I have to add something to that. So I can take any of those pieces of information and add something to it. I said, oh yeah, Uncle Joe, he's such a pain, isn't he? I mean, he always gives me the gifts of these ugly socks that I never like anymore. And, you know, I'll say something. So I'll add something to that. And that's sort of the empowerment piece of that. So that's sort of a yin-yang thing, all right? I'm being vulnerable in that whatever you say I am, all right? And then the empowerment part is that I'm adding to it now and moving the scene forward. So that's the traditional yes and improvisation that's taught at the Pit, UCB, the Squirrel, the Magnet, and most theaters that you know. They also say, for example, don't ask questions, all right? Because if you ask a question, like if you get on stage and you're initiating a scene and you tell your partner, hey, how you doing? What did I do? I just dumped everything on my partner. I didn't offer him a thing. I just said, how are you doing? If I have an idea, I have to offer something. So in a sense, you don't ask questions. The other thing they told me, which I always did poorly, was don't start a fight. In the dramatic improv, starting a fight was a lot of fun. It really was. You know, hey, last night, why did you do that to me? You know, I told you 14 times I don't like meatballs. You put garlic in there, and I got sick again. And, you know, and you have a compelling situation. We like those because they're real-life situations. And you get into family dynamics, you get into things, and the audience relates to that. Right? So we love that type of improv. But in this other type of improv, there's traditional comedic yes and. They say, stop getting into a fight. Why are you always getting into a fight? I said, because I'm used to doing that and it's fun. So I had to learn to not fight, to not ask questions, and to just, of course the yes was always true in every type of improv. All right, but the yes and, again, is the traditional improv that you'll see. All right, so that's why I get into improv. Now, also, a fascinating thing I found in the dramatic improv, because the dramatic improv is more like acting classes, right? And we would take on roles. Like in a traditional yes and improv, you don't know who you're going to be when you come out. You know, you find out in that moment. In the dramatic improv, they usually set up a scene, just a framework. Like I'm a homeless person. I mean, I've played a homeless person. I've played a woman. You know, I played a criminal. I played every type of character I could think of. And so that's really more of an acting class. But what I found is that I became more understanding of those people once I played the role. It's like I channeled that energy and I said, oh, this is what it feels like to be a criminal. I said, I never in my life, with all the meditation and everything I've done, never in my life have I had that opportunity to really go deep into those roles and feel it. So I said, this is compelling. So that's what I loved about the dramatic improv. In the traditional comedic yes and improv that you'll see in the city, they won't get into that. They just want the yes and improv, which basically means you just go through that cycle until something funny happens. So in terms of spirituality, yeah, I mean, I found it very spiritual because improv is about deep listening to your partner. It's about accepting what they have. It's about being truthful to yourself. It's about giving to your partner. It's about being authentic. It's about being sympathetic, tolerant, inclusive. You name it. The list goes on. I mean, you guys have the sheets on there. When I created my website years ago, I said, okay, there's probably half a dozen benefits of improv. And I started the list just goes on. And it's real. I mean, true improv really does have all of those benefits and principles. And you think about it, I keep saying that if everyone lived that life, this world would be a better place. Because it is so giving. It's not about you. Like when you're doing an improv scene with someone, you never tell a joke. Because a joke is all about you. A joke is about, hey, watch me, I'm funny. So you never tell a joke. Instead, you're always giving to your partner. Because you tell a joke, you're cutting your partner out. So you're always giving to your partner, setting them up constantly. I mean, these are wonderful spiritual principles. So the last thing I'll just say is, is something I call the conscious communication cycle, which I have in the book and I also have in a separate paper. If you check my website, it'll be just downloaded and you can have it. So when I studied improv and all of this, I said, okay, I see this communication cycle, this ebb and flow back and forth, which is first deep listening, right? Because if we go on stage, usually what happens in an improv team, you might have a half a dozen people on stage. Somebody comes out and said, hey, we are such and such a team. To get us started, give us one word. Okay, so somebody give me your word.
Feather.
Better?
Feather.
Feather. Feather. Okay, fine. So what happens? This person goes back, so now you have 6 people in the back row thinking about feather. How can we make something up about feather? So they go through a pattern game, association. So each of us in this line would say something like, feather reminds me of birds. Birds reminds me of chickens. Chicken reminds me of dinner. Then it reminds me of Uncle Harry. You go through this pattern game, all of the things that it might association with. Everybody's doing that, right, on the line. Because we got to come out and do something. So somebody might say, okay, I have an idea. That dinner, again, with Uncle Joe, that chicken that he made with it. So they pop out on stage. Now, as soon as they pop out on stage, that means they have an idea of a scene to do. Somebody's got to support them immediately. You never leave anybody out stage alone. Ever, ever, ever. So again, support. Another nice spiritual principle. Always supporting your partner. So you come out on stage, and if I'm the second person coming out, like I said, I don't know what's going on. I have no idea. He's got an idea. Is he going to make me a chicken? Is he going to make me a feather, a bird? What is he? I don't know. So I'm listening with every fiber of my body. Not just the words, but the sentiment under the words, the energy under the words, the intonations, etc. That's step 1, active, deep listening. The second step is I have to assess, and most improv places do not teach this part. Most improv places just teach, okay, say yes and. So if he says, this fella, yeah, that chicken that Uncle Harry made, he always overcooks it. Why does he do that? And then he puts all the sauce on it in order to make it juicier. It's disgusting, right? So I have to listen to that. See, it is disgusting, but you know what? The wine he serves is really good, and it makes the whole thing better. And you just keep going back and forth. Now, so most improv schools will teach yes and. So agree with the thing, add something to it, and you just keep going back and forth, and it usually goes, welcome, welcome. So it usually goes into some form of comedy somewhere along the way, because you're always heightening the scene. But I include a second step, and that is, after I do my deep listening, I want to assess what my feeling is, what my impact is, what my emotional response is to that comment. Because if they say something and I'm surprised, the audience is probably going to see that in my face or pick it up energetically. And if I'm surprised and I say, oh yeah, it was a good chicken, there's going to be a disconnect. They won't quite know what's going on, but there'll be a disconnect in their minds because what they're seeing is not matching. So I have to assess what I'm feeling. So if I'm feeling surprised, saying, okay, I better incorporate that into my and part. Okay, I'm surprised to hear that, but now that I think of it, blah, 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 blah. That's the second part. The third part is now an authentic response back, which is add something to that, but incorporate my emotional reaction. Okay? And then over here, he's doing the same thing. Or she's doing the same thing. Deep listening, what did he just say? And self-assessment in terms of my emotional reaction, and then an authentic response back. So I call that the conscious communication cycle, right? Because it's a cycle of communication between two people that's conscious. Why? Because you're listening, you're focused on that person, you're assessing your feelings, you're being authentic in response. How many times we have a conversation with somebody and we're not really listening because we have something we want to say and we're just waiting for them to shut up so that we can say what we want to say, right? We do that a lot. I do that. I know. We do that a lot. So that's not conscious. In improv, we can't do that. Improv, we got to listen to what's going on and follow the flow. In fact, in improv, when two people come out on stage at the same time, let's say, and you got an idea and they have an idea, whoever speaks first, that's what you go with. The other person's got to drop their agenda. Totally drop the agenda. Because otherwise, if they just talk about their agenda, they just refuse the offer that was made by the other person. So big rule on that. When you come on stage, you got an idea. If the conversation goes the other way, you got to drop it and just go with the flow. So that's the lecture of improv. Does that make sense? Yes. Any questions on that? Okay, so are we ready to play? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the play will be easy. I'll just guide you through some exercises. And these, like I said, we're not going to do improv scenes, but everything that I'm showing you here are all things that we do in improv classes in order to strengthen and develop the muscles we need to do an improv. And you've heard what those muscles are: deep listening, creativity, authentic response, etc. Okay, so we're going to do that. So get into groups of 4s and get rid of the chairs. Okay. Fine. So in here, you know, I want to specify this is going to be a safe container, okay? So whatever you're saying here will stay here. You want to go home and talk about what you did great, what happened great, but don't talk about what anybody else said, okay? Why are we doing that? Because I want you to be free to say whatever it is that you want to say. And the only way you think you can do that is if you have confidence with the other folks that they're not going to say that. All right, everybody good with that? Sure. Okay, good. All right. Now, in improv, there are no mistakes. In fact, there's a phrase in improv that says, there are no mistakes, only happy accidents. So what does that mean? That means like if someone has, quote, a bad statement or whatever, you go with it. Again, support, tolerance. And you go with it. Why? Because that might go to a better place than what you thought. Just like a think tank. They say the note ideas are bad ones, and you just go with it and see what happens. All right? Okay, so what I want to do in this situation, in terms of the psychology of all of these things, you want to take one step at a time in terms of letting go of self-consciousness, of shoulds, of rules. All right, so each of these exercises will go a little bit deeper as we go, and by the end of it, we'll feel a lot freer. So just sort of take a temperature of where you are now. All right, just notice it where you are now, and then notice where you are at the end of this process. All right? Okay, so the first icebreaker, nice and simple. We'll just go around the circle and give folks your name, your childhood location, and your best Christmas holiday memory. Now, in terms of who goes first, let's say the person with the shortest hair goes first, and then go around the circle.
You have the shortest hair.